Okay, welcome to another episode of Ivory GC. Today we have the privilege of speaking with Valerie Chianuri, the General Counsel and Head of People and Operations at nTopology, Inc. With a distinguished career spanning over 2 decades in both the financial and technology sectors, Valerie has been at the forefront of integrating legal expertise with operational excellence. In this episode, we'll explore her journey from financial services to tech leadership, delve into the intricacies of managing legal and people operations in a cutting-edge software company, and discuss the evolving role of in-house counsel in today's dynamic business environment. Valerie, welcome and thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Brian.
So let's start with talking a bit about your role at nTop and your team and what your day-to-day looks like.
Oh gosh, what day to day looks like. Let's start.
I
Let's
threw that
start
one
with
in there as a
the.
catch-all. Why don't we start with the company and your role?
Let's start with the company and the role. nTop is a computational design software company for engineering manufacturing. It's kind of a mouthful, but I work with some of the smartest people pretty much I've ever met in my life. We work a lot with companies that manufacture anything, a lot of complex parts, anything that really has to do with complexity being produced for. We work a lot with air and space and defense, auto manufacturing, medical. So it's a fantastic, fantastic company. It's a bunch of brilliant people. And my role as I initially got hired as general counsel, over time, my role evolved. So I'm overseeing legal, compliance, information security, and human resources.
Okay, got it. And tell us a little about your team. You have a small team within the legal department?
Yes, so I have an attorney and a legal operations person working for me. The legal ops person is relatively new. It was basically we were at capacity, as a lot of small businesses tend to be when you're trying to juggle so many things. I do have a director of information security reporting to me as well, and a small HR team.
Okay. And it's interesting because legal operations is a bit of a buzzword these days and certainly trending. But you don't hear a ton of general counsels say that they have a legal operations professional. Can you talk a little bit about that role, what that person was hired to do, and kind of the tasks that they're performing?
Yeah, it was an evolution. My deputy and I were tackling a lot of operational things. Then I started really needing to focus on more strategic work. So he became the it person for managing our contracts database, looking at our sanctions, sanctions database, responding to inquiries from the go-to-market team and the product team, and it became almost kind of his day-to-day, where he became a legal ops person rather than being a true deputy, which he is, and he has, amazing legal knowledge that it was not really being put to best use. So that's really what this legal ops person came in to do. Really, we needed somebody who's kind of, brass and tacks and just getting stuff done, making
Yeah.
sure that she's the first line of defense to anything that comes our way. And, we have varied requests that come in, and she is learning how to tackle those.
Yeah, that's great. So what is her experience? I mean, how long is she new to the legal operations role? I know you can kind of, at least in my experience, the legal operations professional can have varying backgrounds and experiences. Can you tell
Yes.
us a bit about your position?
Um, she was uniquely qualified for the role because she had experience with two different late stage startups doing legal operations there. So she really understands how, eclectic startups can be. She also
Yeah.
understands that there's usually a lack of process that comes in, and she understands how to implement the process. We had a great pool of candidates when we were interviewing for this role, and we had some people with paralegal backgrounds come in. We had some people with pure operational background. So really, it was a great mix of
Yeah.
candidates. She was, like I said, she was just uniquely qualified for this role because she truly understood startups. And,
Yeah.
to me, a lot of times it's for any role, that's kind of my rule. This is very personal, but if you have the curiosity and you come in with a level of inquisitiveness into
Yeah.
anything you tackle, that is far more important for me than what experience you actually have.
Yeah, the willingness to learn and ask questions is huge. So
Yeah.
a couple things that you mentioned that I want to dive a little bit deeper into. So managing a contract database.
Mhm.
Curious, I think other general counsels would be interested to know what, if you're willing to share what you're using, how well it's worked, how you're managing that process, and also you mentioned the legal operations professional being kind of leader of some internal processes. If you could talk a little bit more about what those processes look like, and provide maybe an example of a process or two that she's taking the lead on, that'd be great.
Yep. So we are using link squares. So this is a shameless plug for link squares. They are working out very well for us.
Yeah.
When I was looking at different legal databases, contract management databases, it was a very close call between link squares and Ironclad. And Ironclad, I know a lot of companies use as well. We're happy with what we have right now. And the issue for me was that I didn't have the time to clean up all the contracts that were kind of being popped over from Salesforce on, every time our team closed the contracts. So it wasn't properly cleaned up, so we weren't taking full advantage of the software. Now we're starting to finally do that.
Before we move the process piece, let's stay on the database a bit, because I know there are a few different ways to use what's been traditionally referred to as a CLM, contract lifecycle management system. In my experience, you can use it kind of from start to finish in the contract negotiation process, from using automated technology to generate a contract, through the redlining process and approval process, to final storage within a repository, and then reporting post execution. Which of those, if not all of them, are you using link squares for?
So unfortunately, I was a little late to the game because we already had Salesforce and Deal Hub integrated for just the processing piece of it. So link squares absolutely has that capability. They have Analyze, which is the product kind of that analyzes existing contract, but they also have Finalize, which is the workflow that you could set up to do the entire process beginning to end. Because I was preempted, no grudges against our operations team, but because I was preempted, in that we had to integrate it in the existing workflow. So really what happens, the sales team uses Salesforce to go through the entire sales process. They upload documents into Salesforce. If the documents are not amended in any way, shape, or form, then it goes through Deal Hub, and it's just an automatic sign-off process. But if it's manual, then there's a negotiation that happens, which usually either my deputy or myself, we negotiate with the customers, and then it goes through DocuSign, and then again goes into Salesforce, and Salesforce is integrated with link squares. It's a clunky process. It's, I wish I could change it because I feel like I'm not using link squares to its full capability, but it's what we do right now. Maybe we'll change it in the future.
I haven't heard of Deal Hub before. So is that a technology platform? Why don't you tell me a little bit about how you use Deal Hub, how it fits within this kind of stack of Salesforce, Deal Hub, and link squares?
So Deal Hub is, I believe they call it a QRM software product. It's basically just purely, pop a template in, set up some rules so that nobody deviates from the rules, and then there is a signature process within Deal Hub. So it's not. I know that there's a possibility that they might have some kind of a redlining feature within Deal Hub at some point in the future. I don't think they have it yet. So it's just very rules based.
Yeah.
So if it's kind of a clean contract that nobody negotiates the terms off, it's very easy. If it's not, it becomes a little tricky. Yeah.
So a frictionless way to maybe get a deal done without some of the legal back and forth, as long with guardrails.
Correct. And that makes it easier for me, because if I see something coming in from Deal Hub, I know that it's the parameters that I set with our operations team and go-to-market team. So I know I don't have to reread everything. I can sign off on it. If it's something that's coming through DocuSign, or I know it's being negotiated, I have to review it, to make sure, do my sanity checks, obviously.
Yeah, got it. And so when the contract is signed and goes into link squares, are you using a reporting? I'm assuming you're using reporting or analytics through link squares to tell me a little bit about how you're losing, like what the link squares part of the process looks like.
Yeah, so we are doing reporting analytics. Link squares has a really great feature for tagging contracts. So for example, if there are things that are important to us, for example, last year somebody asked me, hey, can you tell us how many government and government adjacent contracts we have.
Hmm.
And we can basically tag contracts within link squares with a custom tag that says government and government adjacent. That's based on our preference.
Yeah.
It is highly customizable. So now, after that request, I know how many of these we have.
Got it.
We have, our legal ops person is actually doing that right now. I gave her an initial set of tags and I said, come up with anything that you think is relevant, right? And she's
Yeah.
going through contracts right now and she's coming up with different ways of tagging these contracts so that we can analyze them, categorize them, and figure out exactly where kind of our sweet spot is, who are our best customers, right? Who is really kind of on an up and up for us and who's kind of using our technology to its full potential, and what people negotiate on contracts, right? Different customers
Yeah.
have different priorities.
Yeah. And so aside from the manual tagging, highly customizable for your business, what types of maybe out of the box features or features within link squares that don't require or are more automatic in reporting? What types of information is link squares picking up from your contracts? And what are you using
Uh,
it for, I
they're
guess?
they're pulling they're actually pulling so many fields. But you can basically look if you have, for example, auto renewals. So this is a little bit away from the
Yeah.
customer contracts, because we're also using link squares. We're currently building a new workflow in link squares to do vendor onboarding.
Yeah.
So our company's vendors, they have to go through a certain approval process. We can build that workflow in link squares. And what we also do is they will pull clauses from the contracts for auto renewal or limitation of liability or warranties. It's all kind of, if you, when you look at link squares, it's summarized on the side panel, and you
Yeah.
could pick and choose what's important, and you can actually do searches based on these clauses.
Got it.
They're
And
also,
so,
I think, they're actually also, I think they're rolling out an AI feature, or they already rolled it out, which
yeah.
is, it looks pretty robust.
Interesting. That's great. So let's move a bit to the process piece. So we started getting into your legal ops professional.
Mhm.
What kind of internal processes is she tasked with administering?
So she is, like I said, she's our first line of defense, managing the legal inbox, which is where all the inquiries go from, sales and customer success and engineering, product, you name it. All teams basically are directed there. We just had an attempt by one team to set up a Slack channel directly with legal, and we're like, no, 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 still go to the legal inbox,
Yeah,
please,
yeah,
because
yeah,
that's, it's only, it's three people, so it's difficult.
yeah.
So she knows, she's starting to, I mean, she's relatively new, but she's starting to understand kind of what inquiries need to be escalated, what she can tackle herself. And they could be requests for, hey, we're using this new open source software. What do we need to think about? What do we need to consider? Does this go into our installer, right? Like disclosures for that. Or we have a new customer and they're negotiating a couple of clauses in the contract, or God knows, it's everything
Right.
at once.
Yeah, yeah.
So she's the one managing that inbox. She's also going through our link squares database, tagging and sorting through everything so that we have full use of that database. She will be working on setting up our vendor onboarding workflow and approvals for that. And the feature of, pulling clauses, for example, when is your auto renewal? Do you really want to continue with this vendor? And do you need 60 days or 30 days? And that's available in link squares. She's also managing our sanctions database. We obviously have to monitor sanctions. We work with entities across the world, and some entities end up on the sanctions list, some entities come off the sanctions list, and we need to make sure that we are staying on top of that. And then I mean, there's a whole lot of ad hoc stuff that happens. It's
Yeah.
the startup life.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and the intake process always is interesting to me because there's so many different ways of doing it. So can you talk a little bit about how you use your legal inbox to route requests? Is it a shared mailbox with an Outlook? Everyone just you email that address, and your legal ops professional is tasked with triaging and kind of routing things, addressing things that she can address on her own, and routing others to you and your deputy.
Correct. That is exactly how she handles it. And she came to me last week, which, again tells you kind of wonderful. So you need to surround yourself by wonderful people, because she said, there should be a better way. And I'm like, fine, let's sit down, let's talk about it. So
Yeah.
for now, it's this shared inbox, but
Yeah.
I think there should be a better way. There probably is. And if anybody can suggest a better process for me, I'm all ears, because we're all about improving things or trying to.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, one thing that we've used in the past is, just Microsoft Forms, as
Mhm.
simple of a technology as it is, it can be used within Power Automate, um, in a way that can automate processes to make them pretty streamlined and light touch. I know that the form feature, whether it's Google Forms or there's even form features built within CLMs that do the same type of thing as a Microsoft form. But we have clients that our their salespeople will complete a Microsoft form with the details that are needed in their contracts, and then we put those details into a contract automation platform called Clio Draft. But we've used kind of Microsoft Forms as another way of getting information from people who need to submit it to legal. But we also use a shared inbox too, and I'm sure there's a lot of others out there. And if you're listening and interested, you can leave a note in the show notes on YouTube for any feedback. I don't know if anyone's ever used that, but we'd love to start a discussion there. But yeah, that's really interesting. So can you talk about where nTop is in its maturation, its life cycle? How many employees you have? Where startups are, like you said, can be complex and a little messy at times. Where's your company in your life cycle?
Messy is fun, I think, but that's why I work in startups.
Yeah.
It's kind of my sweet spot. But nTop is we raised our Series D in 2021.
Okay.
Still writing that, and we are about 100 people.
Okay.
A lot of the folks at the company are engineers, very heavy technology focused, because this is truly at heart an engineering company. It is.
Yeah.
We have more PhDs than I've ever seen in one company. Such amazing, smart people who design these incredible products. And I think this year is going to be one of those defining years for the company, because uh, we have really focused on computational design. Because when nTop started out, and even 3 years ago when I joined, it's actually this month is my 3-year anniversary here.
Nice. Congrats.
Yeah, thank you. Even when I joined 3 years ago, we were still trying to find the niche. We had this incredible technology, and it was doing these amazing things, and customers who learned how to really become, proficient with it, were doing incredible things. And in fact, we've even observed that sometimes people start hoarding our tech because it's good, and they don't want to share the magic sauce with other
Yeah.
people, which is
Yeah.
kind of hilarious. It's the opposite of what we're trying to do. But really this year we're all in on computational design. I actually just reposted this post by one of our senior engineers. We were able to do something for a customer that I don't think I don't know of anyone in the industry who was able to do this before. We were able to, using NVIDIA Modulus, which is a NVIDIA open source software, we're able to model and simulate 450 designs, complex designs for a customer in a span of 6 hours, it's unheard of. You basically just, you generate the designs. There are 0 failures that we recorded in that process. This process usually takes months for some of our customers. It's basically now a machine learning model. And, we are so incredibly excited about that. And just like I said, this is going to be a breaking year for us, I think.
That's amazing. So can you talk a little bit in more detail about what nTop offers? I mean, you provided a kind of an overview of what the company does. Can you provide a little bit more detail about your product or service that you deliver?
So all in all, we are, like I said, computational design platform. We have a suite of product. Our main product is just nTop software. That's our platform. We also have nTop Automate. It's an add-on to our software. It helps you go through multiple iterations faster. It's cloud-based. And then we have nTop Core, which helps integration and file transmission between different platforms, because we're obviously not going to be the only one in any engineer's workflow, right? We are going to be part of a workflow that incorporates other software products out there, right? It's going to be companies much bigger than us, Autodesk or, Siemens NX. These are kind of the really big guys on the field. And the integration with those platforms is really important. And
Yeah.
being able to take the precise files that are generated in our software and transition them out to, between these platforms with that same level of precision, that's really important. So nTop Core helps do that.
So for someone who's not familiar with computational design, what are customers coming to you for? Like what problem are you solving for them?
So if you have a complex part, for example, I think a good example for something like that would be a heat exchanger, right? And if there are any engineers listening to me, they would probably just kind of throw something at their screen right now because I have no idea what I'm talking about. I'm just a lawyer who listens really well. I apologize to everyone right now.
Well, that's a good skill to have. But yes, I understand where the legal folks can make the hair stand up on the business folks' neck when they start talking business.
Yes. But a heat exchanger is basically something that cools any part that heats up in an engine, or so if you have an airplane or a car or missile, whatever it is that heats up, it needs to be cooled down. Otherwise, it's just basically going to overheat and explode unintentionally. So, some things do need to explode intentionally, which is a different story. But you have the part that basically has very precise channels that channel either fluid or air, and that needs to basically escape. And the way that you would be able to design that in our software with a lot of precision, right? And these parts are usually we can make them a lot lighter because of how parametric design works in our software. It's all mathematical modeling. You're not sitting there drawing little lines. It's an algorithm that you put in and you basically model it based on the mathematical formula. So you could still find points where you can shave off weight from your part, right? So if it's flying, you want it to be as light as possible, but you don't want it to break. So you can still simulate that. Once you've built it, you can also simulate it in the actual software, and you could see A, how the air is actually flowing or fluid or whatever it is that you're trying to simulate, and B, also how to make it as light as possible without breaking it, right? So you are optimizing that design to the point where it is, we've had customers who were able to lightweight something by 40%, right? Which is incredible. Again, every ounce, every pound matters if you're trying to make something fly. Or, again, heat exchangers are a great example. I hear all about heat exchangers from our engineers. I know what they look like. I kind of sort of know how they work or what they do. But that would be a good example of a part.
Yeah, that's great. That's really helpful. So for a company like that, what are the either most pressing or most frequent legal issues that are that you're finding yourself handling most frequently, or what bubbles up to the general counsel that it doesn't it keeps you up at night, so to speak?
Well, I mean, I think it's every general counsel what they think about when they think about a contract with a customer, right? You have your warranties, you have your liability, right? You want a limitation on your liability, intellectual property rights, right? You want to make sure that we kind of go in, especially, so, we have software, but we also provide a lot of supporting services because our software it's new. So it really requires people to think in a different way when they're using it. So, we try to keep the improvements to our software to ourselves so that we can actually reuse that expertise and build it into the future iterations of the product. And we want to make sure that we respect the rights, the intellectual property rights of our customers. So those are the top three. And, the obvious one is kind of that number 4, the cherry on top is, making sure that we maintain confidentiality. Which is a given. That's an obvious one. But we also have customers that work in defense and where they are, tier 1 contractors to the government, and we have to build additional safeguards, and in addition to what other companies would normally have.
I got it. So, you're seeing, at least I've seen more of this kind of managed software term being used, where it's not purely a SaaS, use it on your own. There's some services component to help your customers make the most out of your software platform. How do you handle that from a contracting standpoint? Do you have two separate agreements for the services side and for the software side, or is that, and feel free to share or disclose as much or as little as you'd like, but it can be a tricky, in my experience, it can be a tricky balance, because you present a services contract to someone and you've got work products in there and people want to own that IP. And with a SaaS platform, we talk about machine learning and models that continuously improve, and you want to retain improvements to your software. How do you handle that from a contracting standpoint?
Multiple different ways.
Yeah.
So there's the pure, here's our license, use it, go to town, right? Here are standard terms, our EULA is published on our website, and you sign up for it, and what's ours is ours, what's yours is yours, and we don't really, you design whatever you want with our product. I think it becomes more complex, to your point, when it's a combination. So we do have a lot of times when we sell our licenses, we also sell customer success packages. So there's a little bit of engineering time, a little bit of assistant that just becomes part of the SKU that is sold together with that package. And same terms apply. It's usually our standard, licensing agreement.
Yep.
Product improvements, we retain them, and then anything that we custom build or we design or we help customer obviously will remain theirs. The tricky part really comes in when we have to work on customer paper. A lot of the larger companies obviously will send you something that absolutely does not apply to anything that you are trying to do, right? It's kind of like, and you will put your source code in escrow. And on top of that, anything you do for your product is ours. And I'm like, can we talk about this a little bit? So.
Yes. Well, I mean, geez. And so are your customers some of the larger companies, because or just larger companies generally, and because they will insist on using their paper and it's not tailored to your product, and so you have to take their paper and adjust it to try to look like your paper, which can just be a headache. But how do you, is that what you're seeing? Is that the situation that you're in frequently, and how are you handling that?
Yeah, with larger customers, definitely. And it ends up looking like the ugliest gremlin you'll ever see, right?
Yeah.
Because it's just, you're trying to, make it apply to a thing that does not apply, right? And we've, I mean, look, I think everybody who works on the smaller business side, right, they can understand the pain. At the same time, we've worked with some of the largest companies and, in auto manufacturing and air and space and defense, and they are wonderful, actually. Once you start the conversation, once they understand where you're coming from, we've only had instances with, I can think of 3 very specific customers who just kind of like flat out, no, we're not, this is not, you're not big enough for us to even talk about this. But overall, the experience is, even though it is slow, it is not, it's not as efficient as we all wish it would be, but I think people understand that you have something that you created that, took a decade to really bring to fruition, and they understand why they want to protect it. So, we've had, like I mentioned, code escrow. This is kind of one of our absolutely not non-negotiables, and people understand. So we find different ways of working around it, providing additional safeguards in the contract of how we can give that confidence that, we'll be around and we will get you the licensing in whatever way we can, even if anything happens to us, right? That's what people usually worry about. But, it's a process, and every time it's kind of a combination of a little bit of cajoling, a little bit of, like pushing on the important parts, and kind of the most important thing, I think, is identifying what is important to us, right? These are our non-negotiables. And I think as a legal professional and as a human being, it's really important that you always identify your non-negotiables, right? And that's it. That's where you stand.
Yeah, we've found that, particularly when negotiating with large customers that have a contract that doesn't fit your business, if you can get on a legal call relatively early, just to explain what you do with the company, with the businesses, and so then both sides can start, one, that's going to be new to the lawyer, on the customer's lawyer, and 2, you've got to be able to see, okay, this is why we're making this change in the contract. This is the business reason. let's get on the same page about what the business looks like, what you're buying, what we're providing, and then we can have that flow through the legal document. But it certainly can be challenging.
Yeah. And that's, it also depends on kind of really it's educating the customer and making sure you get on that call early. You kind of hit the
Yeah.
nail on the head.
Yeah. So to kind of pivot a bit, looking back, what were some of the pivotal moments that shaped your path to becoming general counsel and head of people operations at nTop?
Gosh, it was a winding path.
Yeah.
Uh, I majored in finance in undergrad, and I worked in financial services for 5 years before I went to law school. So definitely not a direct kind of a standard, you go to college, you go to law school, you go to firm type of a situation.
Yeah.
I only recommend it for the adventures. Um, I think I learned over time, like one of the most important things is that don't pick a major in college that you're not good at and that you don't love. Do
Yeah.
something you love.
Yeah.
I think finance was not the right place for me, but it gave me a knowledge base that is extremely helpful.
Yeah.
Understanding how business works, understanding financial side of the house, and I think this is where a lot of attorneys get lost.
Yeah.
Is they think like lawyers, they don't necessarily always think like business people.
Yeah.
So early on when I started working, I worked at different places and I realized that truly my sweet spot is working with startups because they're growing businesses. There's a lot of exciting stuff that happens and you really can contribute to the growth of something that could be amazing. I mean, I've worked for businesses that weren't amazing and that, didn't do that well, but you kind of hope and you have to buy into the vision too, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
for me, like I said, it was a winding path and I kept just learning, and over time you learn enough where you feel like you're ready for a role like being GC and head of people ops, and hopefully I'm
Yeah.
doing a decent enough job with it.
Yeah. I mean, it's such an interesting difference to see as an in-house counsel as opposed to outside counsel, where
Yeah.
when you're outside counsel, you have typically in-house counsel that is your client who can be the conduit between outside counsel and the business. But you
Yep.
need that conduit. You need that connection between, lawyer and business. And oftentimes the in-house team, provides that. If looking back, who are some of the key mentors or influences in your career and what leadership lessons have stuck with you the most?
Oh gosh. I had a partner at Deloitte. I had people at Amex. There are people who have taught me so much that, along the way, I think one of the most important aspects of being a good mentor and just being an amazing example to people is be kind and have patience.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times especially when we're under pressure, when we are not doing kind of like we're doing a million things, we forget about that. And I think, I always have to remind myself of that because I'm kind of, quick on my feet and I have, I'm not the most patient person in the world. And I think that's a virtue I will always extol in other people because to me, my mentors across the board, like I said, at Amex and at Deloitte, and after that, at when I tried the law firm world, which not my jam. I respect everyone who's gone to a law firm. So not my jam.
Yeah.
That hierarchy just kills me.
Why is that? Talk a bit about what uniquely suits you for your in-house role.
I think just being able to make decisions and being able to,
Yeah.
understand how to make a decision, understand what matters for the business, and being able to actually having the capacity and the ability and being given the rights to make those decisions. It's hard
fun.
at a law firm, right? It's fun and you make mistakes, but you own your mistakes, right? The problem is that I think not a lot of people want that. Some people do, but it's okay to make a mistake as long as how you got to that decision makes sense, right? I mean, if you just pulled it out of thin air, then it doesn't work.
Yeah.
But I think my mistake with the law firm world was that I obviously had work experience at that point, and I already was more mature and it was almost like going backwards and being in this very hierarchical world. And this is not a knock to the firm that I tried working for. They're amazing. I actually still interact with the people there. I hire them when I can because they're amazing quality people. It was just not my thing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. I mean, that you get to be closer to the business, and you get to make you participate in the business in a way that you just don't as outside
Exactly.
counsel.
Exactly.
Well, so as we start wrapping up, I mean, there's been, yeah, I come to these episodes with some questions prepared, and this is the fewest number of questions I've gone through in that prepared list by
I'm
far, because
sorry.
you've really no, you brought some really good topics to talk about, and this has been great. But we do like to wrap up with advice that you'd give to someone aspiring to be in your place at your position at some point, a junior lawyer or maybe someone in law school. What advice would you give? Although I feel like this whole episode has been great parcels of that advice already. If you
Other
could
than
summarize
don't
it.
do this, other than don't
Yeah.
do this to yourself. No, we joked about this before the episode, right?
Yeah.
No, I
Yeah.
think bring a lot of curiosity. You
Yeah.
know, enter the world with questions, ask people questions. Don't be afraid to make a mistake. And basically just think about everything in kind of a what could go right type of a way, right? Because a lot of times we think about what could go wrong, but really, if you're doing something like, if you're doing this job, you have to always ask yourself what could go right. And really, um, don't ever try to be the smartest person in the room. Try to find rooms that are much smarter than you, where people are sitting and you can learn from them. So, like I said, curiosity, figure out what could go right, and just keep going into the world with that level of engagement.
That's great. Well, I appreciate you coming on. When I asked the question about, an audience member who doesn't know much about computational design, I was really talking as much about myself as anyone else. I learned something during this episode, as I
I hope
always
I gave
do.
you I hope I gave you right information.
It was fantastic. It's a great conversation. Thank you for joining us, and wish you all the best.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.